Hello and welcome to Pre-Algebra with Miss Betsy. I'm glad that you're with us today. We are studying what proportion is. For those of you who are accustomed to watching my videos, we are using as our text Pre-Algebra for Christian Schools. It's published by Bob Jones University Press. I'm using the first edition, and we are in Chapter 9, Section 2. We are on page 285. Proportion is a very straightforward concept that we're dealing with, and it's simply an equation that states that two separate ratios are equal. And we learned in our last video that all a ratio is, it's a comparison between two numbers. And very frequently, those proportions can be expressed as fractions. And, those ratios can be expressed as fractions. And a proportion is simply an equation that says two fractions are equal. We use this all of the time when we were learning how to write equivalent fractions. What we were actually doing was setting up a proportion. Our text says the ratio of boys to girls in Mrs. Smith's class is 6 to 8. Ratio of boys to girls is 6 to 8. The ratio of boys to girls in Mrs. Burke's class is 9 to 12. The ratio of boys to girls, two different classes, two different total class sizes. How large is this class size here? First class, well, it's 14 students because you have 6 boys, you have 8 girls, you have a total class size of 14. The other class is larger, it's a total number of students in that class of 21. But we're going to see that the relationship between the number of boys and the number of girls is the same, because both 6/8 and 9/12 can be expressed as a fraction in lowest terms of 3/4, correct? 6 divided by 2 is 3, 8 divided by 2 is 4. 9 divided by 3 is 3, 12 divided by 3 is 4. So both of these ratios here, both of these fractions here, reduce to lowest terms to 3/4, so we have a proportion. And we can rightly say that 6/8 is not equal to 9/8. That's not true, is it? 6 over 8 is equal to 9 over 12. And this is an example of a proportion. And something that's really valuable piece of information here, something that's very important, is the fact that in a proportion, the cross products are equal. Cross products are equal. Now, what's a cross product? Multiply that's sort of like going catty corner across a 4-way stop sign. 6 times 12. Is that equal to 8 times 9? Yes, 72 is equal to 72. So when you have a proportion set up, the cross products here always have to equal the same value. If you get a different number here, then remember that's how we could tell that we did not have equivalent fractions, because the cross products were different. But now what we're going to do is use this piece of information here, this fact that tells us that cross products in a proportion are equal, and we're going to use that to be able to solve for an unknown quantity. So let's see what we're talking about. Before we do that, let's go ahead and use cross multiplication to write equals or not equals for 8/14, 12 over 21. 8 over 14, 12 over 21. They want us to use cross products to say what symbol goes in there. Is it equals to or not equal to? Cross multiplication says 8 times 21, 14 times 12, 2 8s are 16, 168. 14 times 12, not in the mood to do that, but I'm in my head. 28, oh my, interesting. Good thing I didn't do it in my head, because the cross products are the same, therefore the symbol that belongs up here is the equal sign. Okay? That's just an example of using cross products to demonstrate that we have a true proportion here. And I had said just a moment ago that we're going to use the fact that we now know that the cross products in a proportion are equal to help us solve when we have a variable. We have this instruction here. It says simply solve 6 over 15 is equal to 8 over n. This is one of the most valuable little techniques that you use in algebra, cross products. What do we have? 6 times n is equal to 8 times 15. When we do our multiplication, 6n is equal to 120. Pretty nice, isn't it? Because you now know what to do. You're going to divide both sides of this equation by 6 so that we end up with simply n on the left-hand side of the equation. 120 divided by 6, and we have used the piece of information we have that says that the cross products in a proportion are equal, and that let us say that 6 times n was equal to 8 times 15, or 15 times 8. We used our method for isolating a variable then to come up with the fact that n is equal to 20. You will use this constantly, all of the time, in math work, in high school. You'll use it in real life as well. Next page. You can use proportions to solve word problems. Use them all the time. That's a real life usage of algebra that you might not even realize that you're using algebra, but it's what it actually is. Let's say, when you write a proportion, be careful to set the ratios up in the same order. Example 3 says, write a proportion and solve. The ratio of adults to students on a bus is 2 to 7. If there are 8 adults, how many students are there on the bus? Well, what information do we know? We know we have the ratio of, is it adults to students or students to adults? The ratio of adults to students is, do you remember that is means equals? The ratio of adults to students is 2 to 7. So what we've done here is we have set up a proportion. The relationship between the adults and students is 2 adults for every 7 students. Now, if there are 8 adults on the bus, how many students? Well, let n equal, well, I wrote an n, how about if I do let x equal the number of students. Now we have an expression that we can come up with. There are 8 adults. How many students are there? We don't know. We're going to use an X. Because we know that the relationship or the ratio, the comparison between adults and students is going to be the same. We're going to do cross products. 56 is equal to 2x. 7 times 8 is 56. Now what do? We're going to divide both sides of this equation by 2. And we have x is equal to 28 students. See how easy it is to use a proportion? Use the fact that cross products in a proportion are equal, to take pieces of information that's given and say, oh, well, since I know what the relationship is, the ratio that exists between adults and students, I can figure out that there are 28 students on this bus. If I have 8 adults, there have to be 28 students. Now you might say, I don't really like solving it like this when the variable is on the right-hand side of the equation. Is there another way that I can do that? Well, sure there is. Okay, we have 8 adults. How many students? And we know that the relationship between those, that's not a z, is 2 to 7. If the cross products are equal, you don't have to set it up 8 times 7. You can say 2 times x is equal to 8 times 7. 2x is 56. We're going to divide both sides of that equation by 2, and then we see once again that x is equal to 28. Okay? That's all that we're doing in section 9.2. I'll see you next time.